By the time the 200th denial arrived, Port Nidra's aging bulkheads had cooled to a deep metallic twilight. The old way station orbited a nameless brown dwarf, forgotten by commerce and law alike. Its corridors smelled of ion dust and fried protein, and its artificial gravity stuttered a shade too light, as if the station were perpetually bracing for a jump it would never make. Kiraal Oden sat alone in a cramped rental cubicle overlooking a docking arm, her eyes fixed on a terminal that hummed with the low, insective buzz of an overtaxed processor. Her hands, long-fingered and ash-pale in the terminal's blue light, trembled despite the heated air. The message that had just appeared on the screen was painfully familiar. Asylum case reference, QP093K Oden, Kiraal. Decision, denied. Reason code, network stability, security concerns. The denial summary scrolled down in trade tongue, the same paragraphs she could have recited from memory. Respect for her courage, regret for her suffering, gratitude for her belief in their justice, and then, inevitably, the phrase that filled her with a cold, steady rage. In light of credible intelligence indicating your involvement in destabilizing terror activities. She closed her eyes. The words dripping off the screen were the Tzai Dominions, not the Hilari assemblies, nor the Rusk hegemonies, nor any of the others. Yet they appeared almost identically in all 200 responses, as though the galaxy's powers had agreed on a shared script. The terminal chimed again. A second message. Port Nidra's systems, ever eager to monetize misery, had a service attached to the Interstellar Asylum network. All possible host polities have responded to your case file, the new notification said. Your case is now closed. Kiraal exhaled, a slow, tired sound. The alien who had once overseen logistics flows for half a continent of Kessal Prime had done everything properly. Filed complete testimonies, authenticated logs, documented abuses with a bureaucrat's obsession for detail. She had exposed the Tzai Dominion's chokehold over her world, its secret relocation campaigns, the Nullbrand implants that turned dissidents into trembling puppets. She had carried a stolen memory spire across sectors, tendrils of data encoded in crystalline light. It contained scenes she could not bear to watch again. Camps, re-education halls, neat rows of bodies under a sky lit with the Dominion symbols. It was proof. Proof no one wanted. The door chime to her cubicle vibrated against its frame. Outside, someone cleared their throat. "The file's done?" Rusk Talvin's voice, rough and sanded by vacuum suit scrubbers, came through the thin metal. Kiraal did not answer immediately. She kept staring at the words, "Your case is now closed," as if sufficient focus might make them rewrite themselves. Rusk knocked anyway, a gentle rapping that sounded incongruous on his scarred knuckles. "Kiraal, it's near 9 p.m. station time. We got to decide if we're staying or skipping." She touched the door latch. It slid aside with a reluctant hiss. Rusk filled the doorway, tall and wiry, his mottled coat patched with more repairs than original fabric. His eyes flicked from her tense shoulders to the terminal's screen. He did not need to read the message to know what it said. 200, he said quietly. 200, she echoed. He scratched at the faint ridge of scar across his jaw, a souvenir from some border skirmish long before they met. "You knew it would end like this." "I knew it could," she corrected. "I did not know there was nothing left in any of them. No will, no shame, nothing." Rusk shifted his weight. The corridor lights dimmed around them for a moment as Port Nidra's grid compensated for some unseen load. "The pact of spheres is a web that took centuries to spin. No one's going to set it on fire for one whistleblower, Kiraal, not when the Tzai hold half the strands." "And if it was 2, 10, Kiraal asked, 1,000? "Then they'd send thoughts and condolences by the crate," he said dryly, "and still do nothing." For a heartbeat, she almost laughed. The urge died quickly. Her gaze drifted back to the terminal. The Interstellar Asylum Network logo rotated in the corner, a stylized sphere surrounded by intersecting arcs. Beneath it, in tiny text that she had previously ignored, a link blinked. "View full routing and escalation history." It was supposed to be a transparency feature, a concession to activist demands. No one used it. No one wanted to see the pathways their pleas took through indifferent bureaucracies. She tapped it anyway. Lines of metadata unfurled before her, a spiraling tree of nodes and timestamps. First submission, Kessel Prime's local relay, flagged high sensitivity. Then a scatter of transmissions. to the Tzai Dominion's own review body, to the Pact's central registry, then outward to 200 species, some she had never heard of before she fled. At the bottom of the list, below a collapsed set of entries marked Associate and Provisional Members, one name was still highlighted in yellow. Solborne Union, Associate. The timestamp on its last activity was only a few minutes old. The route indicator pulsed as if mid-transfer. Kiraal blinked. "What is that?" Rusk leaned closer. His breath smelled faintly of reheated broth. "Some new players. Humans. They came out of their gravity well not that long ago. Make a lot of noise for their size." "Humans," she repeated, tasting the unfamiliar word. It felt heavy, crude in her mouth. Rumors of them had circulated even on Kessel Prime before the Dominion tightened the filters, a species that had burned its homeworld's atmosphere and clawed it back again, that argued with itself incessantly, and somehow built something enduring from the arguments. The Tzai media had called them the Ferals from the Blue World, half amusement, half warning. Kiraal clicked for more information. The Solborne Union's profile was threadbare. Provisional trade agreements, limited access to the Pact's defense networks, a note about rapid technological ascent, a separate showy declaration regarding universal asylum and refuge commitments. Associate member, she thought, not even fully inside the club. "Does their law recognize the binding accords?" she asked. Rusk squinted. "You're not serious." She scrolled. There it was, in stark earnest language. The Solborne Union had signed on to every humanitarian clause the Pact had, even those beyond its current obligations. Some diplomat from the Blue World had insisted, apparently. "A civilization's first gestures," she murmured, half to herself, "are often its most sincere." Rusk folded his arms. "Or its most performative." Kiraal's fingers hovered over the confirm field. The clause was clear. If all primary signatories denied a claim, the system was still required to forward a copy to any associate member that had opted in. It was a vestigial line from an old debate, left in the code because no one believed it would matter. "It will not change anything," Rusk said. "They cannot help you. Even if they want to, they can't stand up to the Dominion." "They do not need to stand," Kiraal said. "They only need to look." She pressed confirm. The network pulsed. Somewhere beyond Port Nidra's lazy orbits, a tight beam packet of her life, her crimes, her evidence, sped toward a cluster of soul-born nodes located in a modest slice of human-claimed space. Rusk sighed, a long, resigned sound. "You really are incapable of stopping before the end of a road, aren't you?" "If I stopped earlier," Kiraal replied, "I would still be wearing their implant." Her hand strayed to the back of her neck, where the flesh bulged slightly around the invisible presence of the Nullbrand. It ached whenever she lay down, a cold pressure directly on her spine. Rusk's eyes flicked there and away. "Right. Well, I'll be in the bay. We burn for the League of Silent Systems at 7 a.m. if you're still mad enough to be aboard." He turned away, leaving her with the terminal's soft glow and the slow thump of her own heart. Time stretched thin. Port Nidra's public address speaker cycled through docking notices and hazard warnings in 4 languages, none of which mentioned her. On some distant level, she knew that her packet had reached the Solborne Union almost instantly by relativity-corrected relays. But responses, real ones, usually took days, weeks, whole seasons. The terminal chimed. A new notification overlaid the fading denial summaries, bearing the Solborne Union's emblem, a stylized star cradled by intersecting orbits. Asylum case reference, QP093K Oden, Kiraal, review status, emergency. Kiraal's breath caught. She opened the message with a thumb that suddenly did not feel like her own. A clear, unaccented voice spoke through the tinny speakers, translated to her trade tongue with machine precision. "It is the determination of the Solborne Union that you face a credible and imminent threat to life and liberty," the voice said, "and that you have provided sufficiently verifiable preliminary evidence of systemic persecution. Provisional asylum is granted, effective immediately, pending formal review. Extraction and protection assets are en route." She read the text as the voice spoke, the words lining up in clean, human standard characters. Decision time elapsed 8 minutes. For a few seconds, Kiraal thought this must be some cruel simulation, a training scenario playing off her own file, mocked up by Dominion interrogators. Then the metadata field scrolled past. The transmission headers bore the cryptographic marks of the interstellar Asylum network. The routing logs were consistent. There was no trace of internal loopback. She opened the seat storage compartment and pulled out the memory spire. The crystalline rod looked almost benign in her hand, a dull shard the length of a finger. In its facets, trapped light twitched like imprisoned lightning. "Someone looked," she whispered. Outside, Port Nidra's bulkheads thrummed as Rusk's ship, the Ghost Current, began pre-flight checks. Inside, in a secure facility on a green-blue world her eyes had never seen, an artificial mind replayed her life at impossible speed. SEERGRID did not think in words, but if it had, they would have been something like this. Pattern matches historical whistleblowers from authoritarian regimes. Tzai behavior consistent with high-confidence cover-up. 200 near-identical denials suggest coordinated chilling effect. Predicted risk to claimant, terminal within 30 standard days without protection. Recommend immediate provisional asylum. Notify human operator for confirmation. A bell chimed in a brightly lit office in the office of Solborne Refuge. A human administrator glanced at the notification in the corner of his vision, read SEERGRID's flagged summary, and, trusting the system that had proven more cautious than bold in the past, hit approve. The whole process took 8 minutes. Back on Port Nidra, Kiraal's legs gave out. She slid down the wall to the deck, memory spire clutched tight against her chest. For a long moment there were no tears, no grand displays of emotion, only a profound, disorienting absence of the weight she had carried since the day she fled Kessel Prime. She had not been believed yet, she was not safe yet, but for the first time in years, the universe had not responded with indifference. It had answered, quickly. Rusk reappeared in the doorway without knocking this time. "Kiraal," the jump window moved up, the station's... He saw her on the floor, the open message on the terminal. The rough old smuggler stared at the Solborne emblem for a good 10 seconds. The terminal's cooling fan buzzed between them. "No one decides something like that in 8 damn minutes," he muttered. Kiraal looked up. "They did." Rusk rubbed his face. "You know what this means. The Tzai aren't going to just snarl and send angry letters. They'll come." "They have always come," she said. "The difference is, someone else is coming too." Her voice was not triumphant. It was thin, cautious, like a plant emerging from scorched soil. Rusk exhaled hard. "All right then, let's see how much trouble the pharaohs from the blue world are willing to buy." He offered her a hand. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. They both understood that somewhere out there, far beyond Port Nidra's failing sensors, a countdown had begun. On the core world of Kazithar, the Tzai Dominion's capital shone like a blade in the dark. Its spires pierced the cloud layers, their tips vanishing into the humming sky of orbital infrastructure. In one of those towers, in a windowless operations chamber, Magister Vuskren watched numbers in the Vigil Halo flow past his eyes. He didn't watch them with awe. He watched them with the calm detachment of one who had come to see the omniscient network as an extension of his own senses. Flags bloomed across a representation of the Dominion's border, a cluster of threat indicators around a nondescript node in the Asylum network, a correlation with an old file tagged Oden Kiraal, a spike of interpolity chatter. There, the line of data he had expected for some time. Associate member Solborne Union has granted provisional asylum to flagged subject. Vuskren brought up a model of Solborne political posture, a rough, somewhat condescending compilation of human history and interstellar behavior. It spoke of a species that contradicted itself, that built law atop atrocities, that took every lesson as a justification to try again instead of an excuse to retreat. "They are naive," was the Dominion's official analysis. "They overestimate the power of words." Vuskren had learned to distrust official analyses. He opened Kiraal's full file, her defection, her theft of the memory spire, her transfer routes. The statistical probabilities that she was dead had dropped each time she somehow reached another polity's intake center, only to spike again with each denial. Now they plummeted once more, but the curve did not rise after. The Solborne Union's grant created a new branch in his model, one that did not end cleanly. He did not feel malice toward her. If anything, he felt a flicker of professional admiration. To have carried the spire this far, through so many rejections, was in its way a feat of endurance parallel to his own patient work maintaining the Dominion's narratives. Still, she represented danger. Not because of the atrocities themselves, those had been sanctioned, optimized, run through the proper algorithms, but because of what their evidence, unedited, might do to the network of mutual fear that kept the Pact of Spheres coherent. He keyed in a command. "Intractable edict," he said. His voice carried through encrypted channels to the heavy cruiser already within a few jumps of Solborne space. "New priority. Target Oden, Kiraal. She has been accepted by a minor associate member. There is a window before their protections solidify." The captain of the edict, a thin-faced officer more comfortable with firing solutions than law, replied, "Magister, the Pact will object if we make a direct move on a forum-affiliated intake hub as soon as she arrives." "I am not authorizing an attack on Solborne territory," Vuskren said. The words were true in their narrow sense. "You will present yourself at the Orbital Mediation Forum as a guarantor of Dominion interests. Meanwhile, we will employ other channels." He signaled another branch of his apparatus. 2 on-car syndicate brokers received encrypted offers, generous payments in hard currency for a small team of mercenaries with certain skills. An old exploit, buried in the Asylum network's code when the Vigil Halo first courted Pact integration, was quietly activated and tested. "In addition," Vuskren said to the cruiser captain, "we will introduce context into the Solborne systems to demonstrate that they have been misled." He watched the models shift. In his mind, the galaxy was a balance sheet. For every deviation, a counterforce could be applied. He did not yet understand that he had just placed his hand on one of the few levers in the galaxy that would not move the way he expected. The HSF Aletheia had been designed as a warship and refitted as a lifeline. In the early days of the Solborne Union's expansion, its keel had been laid as a strike cruiser, meant to project force into contested space. It had a wolfish profile, angles and recesses meant to hold weapons, armor plating thick enough to shrug off pirate volleys. By the time Kiraal's packet reached Earth, much of that had been replaced. Weapon mounts had been swapped for modular docking bays suitable for rescue shuttles. Medical wards and legal interview rooms lined decks that once stored munitions. The Aletheia still carried respectable defensive systems and veil glass arrays, but now its mission profile read humanitarian operations, refugee extraction, high-risk evacuations. Captain Naira Solberg stood at the main observation blister, arms folded, as the stars streaked around her ship. At 3 a.m. ship time, the bridge was quieter than usual, lit mostly by the glow of console arcs. She had read Kiraal's file 3 times. The first, as an officer, noting the threat flags, the Tzai accusations of terror, the potential for their mission to be intercepted. The second, as a human, seeing the flat lines of text about re-education centers, Nullbrand implants, ghosted population registries, and connecting them to the parts of Earth's history her grandparents still spoke of in hushed anger. The third, as someone who had once shepherded a refugee flotilla through a pirate ambush, measuring the rhythm of Kiraal's escalation of pleas, the meticulous structure of her testimony, the stubborn persistence even as the denials piled up. 8 minutes, she said softly. She must think we're mad. We're desperate, said a voice behind her. Naira did not turn. She recognized Dr. Marin Caro by the cadence of her footfalls and the slight jangle of her pocket tools. Marin, for her part, usually recognized when a commanding officer wanted solitude, but the message that had brought the Aletheia out here was not the kind that waited politely. I read SEERGRID's justification trail, Naira said. Every risk flag lit, every comparison to historical cases blew past its thresholds. We built that system to be cautious, Marin, not generous. And still, 8 minutes. Marin moved up beside her. Slight, with close-cropped black hair and a face that seemed incapable of empty politeness, she peered out at the hyperstream's artificial smear of stars. That's what scares the other polities about it, she replied. We don't just say we're going to listen this time. We trained a machine not to look away. Naira allowed herself a wry smile. And then we wired that machine into our Asylum decision pipeline. It cannot approve on its own, Marin reminded her. You still have to tap the screen. Some clerk on the night shift in this case, Naira sighed. I doubt he realized he was throwing us all into the fire. Marin tucked her hands into her coat pockets. You don't sound displeased about the fire. I'm a captain in the Solborne service, Naira said. If I wanted a quiet life, I would have stayed dirtside. Her gaze drifted to the corner of the blister, where a small hollow quietly shimmered. It was connected to the Office of Solborne Refuge's main thread, currently muted. The emblem of the Union pulsed at slow intervals. "What's your read on her?" Naira asked. "Kiraal." Marin's expression tightened. "From the logs? Meticulous, hypervigilant, persists in telling the same version of events even when rewarded for softening them. Presents detailed supporting materials that cross-validate. If she were lying, it would be one of the most sophisticated deceptions I've ever seen." "And if she isn't?" Naira said, though she already knew. Marin stared past the streaming stars. "Then we are about to drag into the public eye a crime on a scale that makes even our ancestors' worst look small. And we'll be doing it with half the Pact's leadership telling us to bury it." She paused. "Elias knows this. He could have quietly leaned on the clerk, told him to rescind. He didn't." Naira grunted. "Elias Morcant has lived his whole political life in the shadow of the Accords. He was born into a world that had already drafted its own Bill of Sentient Rights and then had to convince older powers to take it seriously. If he walks back from Kiraal now, he'll be walking back from his own reasons for standing where he does." Marin did not say, and Naira did not need to hear, that Elias also understood the strategic side. The Solborne Union was small on the galactic stage, but not negligible. Its moral capital was its sharpest tool. If it traded that away for comfort, it would become just one more junior partner to the likes of the Tzai Dominion. The bridge intercom chimed softly. "Captain," came Deputy Marshal Aaron Gelbrecht's voice. "Border beacon confirms Port Nidra's last traffic ping. The ghost current departed 15 minutes ahead of schedule on a liminal convoy vector. Kiraal is aboard." "Estimated intercept?" Naira asked. "If they hold their burn and we push our drive, 2 hours, Aaron replied. "Maybe less if Rusk Talvin spent more on his engines than he did on his paint." Naira smiled faintly. "He did, actually. I've seen his ship's maintenance records." "Of course you have," Aaron said. "Marshals will be prepped on Bay 2 when we dock." "Understood. Bridge out." She glanced at Marin. "We'll have a little time with her before the galaxy shows up." Marin nodded. "I'll make it count." The ghost current shuddered as it broke from its last micro-jump. Rusk Talvin wrestled with a control yoke that wobbled more than was good for his nerves. Old retrofit, he thought. Should have sprung for a new one when I had the chance. The freighter's dented nose cone filled the view with a wash of Solborne beacon light. "We're in their net," he called back. Kiraal, strapped into the co-pilot's chair, watched the starfield resolve into the familiar but still unnerving proximity of a major power's border. Virtual overlays in her retinas scrolled Solborne broadcast codes, greeting protocols, an invitation to approach a point labeled Sit Prime Intake. Citrine Spoke. "Do we trust this?" Rusk asked, half to himself. "You trusted their 8 minutes enough to point your nose this way," Kiraal said. He snorted. "I trusted that trying to run the other way would get us shot up by Dominion patrols. There's a difference." She could not argue with that. Port Nidra had grown tense within hours of the Solborne decision. The usually languid station controllers had suddenly become officious, scanning the ghost current 3 extra times, refusing to refuel without advance payment. Rusk had smelled the change in the air. "They don't want to be on the same manifest as you, in case the Tzai comes snooping," he had said as they'd undocked. "Can't blame them, but I don't plan on hanging around to see whose side they take when the negotiations start." Now, as the ghost current slid into the nested sensor nets of the Solborne Union, Kiraal's gut tightened. Part of her still expected everything to dissolve into trickery, the codes to vanish, the beacon to reveal itself as a Tzai trap, the stars themselves to rearrange into the Dominion's emblem. Instead, a new presence touched the communications band. "Vessel Ghost Current, this is Solborne Service Humanitarian Cruiser Aletheia," said a voice, crisp and clear. "We are approaching from bearing 38 Mark V, relative. Please adjust course for soft dock with our Bay 2. You are carrying Asylum grantee Kiraal Oden. On behalf of the Solborne Union, welcome." Rusk glanced at the sensors. An icon resolved out of the noise, tagged with verbose identification. "That's a big ship to send for one person," he muttered. "Maybe they expected me to bring friends," Kiraal replied, unable to keep a thin edge of dry humor from her voice. He shot her a sideways look. "Do you know, if I survive this, I am charging you double." "If you survive this," she said, I will write you any letter of thanks you like. Make it a credit transfer instead, he said, and guided the ghost current toward the looming shape of the Aletheia. Citrine Spoke orbited a modest star at the edge of Solborne space, its 6 arms reaching out into the void like a frozen explosion. Traffic lanes glimmered with shuttle trails and freighters, but the segment dedicated to the Aletheia's docking was held clear. As the ghost current settled into the bay with a gentle thunk, Kiraal felt a subtle difference in the gravity field. It was cleaner, steadier than Port Nidra's. The air that hissed into the freighter when the inner hatch opened was cooler, less stale. It smelled faintly of ozone and something botanical. Kiraal hesitated at the threshold. In her mind, borders had always been dangerous places. Crossing them meant new watch lists, new regulations, new flavors of indifference. This border, though, this one had already spoken. Go on, Rusk said quietly. If they shoot you, I'll point out their hypocrisy to anyone who cares. She stepped out. Human boots rang on the deck plate outside. 2 figures waited just beyond the airlock, a woman in a slate blue coat bearing a medical symbol on her shoulder, and a man in darker security black, holstered sidearm in plain sight. The woman stepped forward, palms open, fingers splayed in a gesture that Kiraal's translator filtered as formal welcome. Her face was thinner than Kiraal expected, her skin a medium brown, her eyes intensely focused. Kiraal Oden, she said, in halting but clear Kasali trade dialect. My name is Marin Caro. I am a xenopsychologist with the Office of Solborne Refuge. This is Deputy Marshal Aaron Gelbrecht. We are here to receive you. As gestures of state power went, it was subdued. No fanfare, no blaring anthems. Yet something about the way Marin chose to speak her awkward Kasali instead of the more common lingua made Kiraal's throat tighten. Your accent is terrible, Kiraal said. Marin's mouth twitched. I had 2 days in an angry language tutor, she replied. If you are willing, we can switch to standard trade, but I wanted you to hear, at least once, that we tried. Behind them, Aaron stood with arms comfortably loose at his sides, giving the impression of someone who could move very fast if needed but preferred not to. His light blue eyes met Kiraal's steadily. He inclined his head. Ms. Oden, you're under Solborne protection now. No Tzai officer, no pact official, no one at all gets to lay a hand on you without our law being involved. That's not just talk. She believed that he believed it. That was something. Kiraal stepped fully into the bay. The hatch hissed closed behind her, sealing the ghost current inside. Rusk lingered at the edge. If she disappears, I'm coming back, he said to Marin and Aaron, with very angry letters. Marin nodded solemnly. We will log your concern as a formal complaint. Aaron's mouth curved. He tossed Rusk a small, thin rectangle. In case you ever decide you're done running cargo for people who treat you like a ghost, he said. That's a contact key for our border contracts office. We pay, and we don't shoot at you when it's inconvenient. Rusk caught it with more grace than his frame suggested. For a second, a surprised warmth flickered across his face. Then he stuffed the card into a pocket and turned back to his ship, muttering something about sentimental bureaucrats. Marin gestured toward the corridor. If you can walk, we would like to get you to medical. You mentioned in your file you are still carrying a Tzai Nullbrand? Kiraal's neck tensed at the word. Many have refused to touch it, she said. They say removing it would be an escalation. Aaron's jaw hardened. The day we start accepting that logic, he said, we might as well hand the keys of our species to the highest bidder. Marin shot him a look that blended fondness and censure. We will assess, she told Kiraal more gently. We have procedures, and we have practice. Practice? Kiraal asked, startled. Marin nodded. You are not the first to come through with an implant from a regime that wanted to keep you on a leash. You are, however, the first they've threatened half the pact over. Kiraal walked. The medical ward of the Aletheia was bright and clean, but not sterile in the old sense. There were plants, enclosed in transparent spheres, releasing a faint, earthy aroma. Soft sounds of water filled the spaces between beeps and hums. Kiraal lay on a padded table while a cluster of humans hovered around a display showing her neck from a dozen angles. The Nullbrand appeared there as an ugly obstruction, a dark knot woven into delicate strands of nerves. We can reach it, said the lead surgeon, a woman whose name Kiraal did not catch. But it's wired into everything they could find. It might be fused with memory sectors. Removal could cause loss of function, of personality markers. It could kill me, Kiraal said. Yes, the surgeon said, but the alternative is that something out there can, any time, any place. Silence settled. Kiraal remembered the way the Nullbrand had burned the first time she refused a supervisor's order, the way it had sizzled along her spine when she concealed the memory spire in a crate of replacement parts, the way it had throbbed when she signed her first asylum form. She had left Kiraal Prime with the Dominion embedded in her flesh. Take it out, she said. Marin, standing by her side, squeezed her hand. We will do everything we can to keep you intact. Aaron watched from the observation gallery, hands pressed to the glass. The procedure was not quick. It took the better part of 2 hours. At one point, Kiraal's heart stuttered and her awareness dissolved into a disjointed haze of light and pain. She glimpsed memories, some hers, some perhaps recorded by the Nullbrand, a courtyard where people in gray marched in lockstep, a quiet office where she had once, long ago, altered a logistics file to reroute food to a starving district, the inside of a Tzai conditioning cell where a young Hilari boy had curled up and rocked himself to sleep. When she woke, her neck burned, but the pressure she had grown so used to that she no longer noticed it was gone. The surgeon held up a sealed containment canister. Inside, the Nullbrand twitched weakly, tiny filaments stretching against the field like dying tendrils. We will be studying that very closely, Aaron said from behind the glass. Kiraal's first unchained breath felt like inhaling a new gravity field. Why? She whispered hoarsely. Why risk this much for one refugee? You could have said the words, put me in a room, and never touched their leash. Marin, who had stayed by her throughout, answered without hesitation. Because, she said, we have been the ones putting chains under skin. Not all of us, not for a long time, but enough of us that when we built the Union, we wrote a promise into its bones. We would never again be the hands that tighten such a band around someone's neck. We cannot stop the Tzai from using these, but when someone comes into our house wearing one, we take it off. Kiraal turned her head, feeling the stitches pull. And if the Tzai come? She asked. If they say removing it was an act of war? Marin's eyes were steady. Then we answer in the only language that has ever made empires reconsider. We stand together and say no. On Kzithar, Magister Vuskren assessed an updated graph. Nullbrand connection to subject Oden, Kiraal, lost. He closed his eyes briefly. There was a certain grim beauty in the humans' approach. They did not merely hide their defiance under legalese. They enacted it in flesh and circuitry. So be it, he murmured. If they insist on throwing themselves between the hammer and the anvil, we will count them among the struck. In the days that followed, the Aletheia remained anchored to Citrine Spoke. Kiraal was moved from the medical ward to a secure yet comfortable cabin. Through its viewport, she could see only a sliver of the station's arm, studded with docking ports and cargo clamps. She spent long hours being interviewed. Marin led many of those sessions, asking questions with a gentleness that belied the precision behind them. Aaron attended some, watching Kiraal's body language as closely as he listened to her words. Kiraal recounted life on Kiraal Prime, the day-to-day rhythms of a logistics official, the way the Dominion's algorithms dictated shipping routes, resource distribution, even who was allowed to change jobs. She described the first time a shipment of medical supplies went missing, overridden by a higher priority directive that sent it to a re-education center in the Southern Hemisphere. The first time a Nullbrand misfire killed someone outright. The first time she realized that the patterns of relocation matched a quiet, systematic erasure of entire neighborhoods known for dissent. She described how the Vigil Halo, ostensibly a purely predictive network meant to prevent disasters, had begun assigning risk scores to communities, and how those with the highest scores were the ones that disappeared. You saw the logs? Marin asked. I administered them, Kiraal said. The orders came down from Kzithar, rubber-stamped through 3 layers of automated approvals. On paper, it all served stability. In reality, she trailed off. Aaron leaned forward. You stole evidence. Kiraal's fingers brushed the memory spire, sitting inert on the table between them. It now resided physically in Solborne custody, replicated twice over, but the original still felt like the heart of her rebellion. I rerouted a routine replacement shipment, she said. Instead of sending a worn-out data crystal back for scrapping, I sent the memory spire. I encrypted Dominion combat logs, camp surveillance footage, internal memos, anything I could get. Then I falsified the disposal records. You knew what would happen if they caught you, Marin said. For a Nullbrand carrier, there is no gradual discipline, Kiraal replied. There is only obedience or termination. You could have just run, Aaron pointed out, without the spire. And who would have believed me then? She asked. Aaron had no answer. On a visceral level, as a human whose history was full of people not believed until it was too late, he understood. SEERGRID listened as well, not with ears but through encrypted taps into the Aletheia systems. It analyzed Kiraal's phrasing, cross-checked dates and names. It correlated her narrative with smoothing anomalies in the Vigil Halo's public telemetry and with shipping manifests from neutral worlds. The longer it listened, the more its confidence increased. Probability that Kiraal Oden's core claims are substantially true, rising. Probability that Tzai accusations are fabricated, rising. At the office of Solborne Refuge on Earth, a report slid onto Elias Morcant's desk. He read it under the diffuse light of a late afternoon, the city outside his window glowing with the warm haze of a world that had rebuilt itself more than once. He was not a young man. Gray threaded his dark hair. The lines around his eyes were etched by 1,000 negotiations and 1,000,000 small moral compromises. But there were some lines he had never crossed, and Kiraal Oden's case poked at one of them. He skimmed the executive summary, then dug into the technical files. SEERGRID's models of the Vigil Halo amused him in their own strange way. The Tzai's pride and joy had been turned into a series of clustering diagrams in a human-made AI's mind. He paged his advisors. The call went out, and before long his private office overlay filled with translucent projections, legal experts, security officials, representatives from the Coalition for Sentient Rights, a Navy liaison from Admiral Breslow's staff. "This is going to blow up," said the Navy liaison blandly. "The Dominion will not let it stand. They will demand extradition. When we refuse, they will threaten force. Even if they don't act, others will assume they might. Our trade, our position in the pact, everything gets more precarious." A legal scholar adjusted her glasses. "On the other hand, if we cave, if we hand Kiraal over or quietly send her to some neutral facility, we destroy any credibility our asylum commitments have. Every sentient thinking of coming to us will know we are only safe until a big enough bully knocks." A representative from the coalition leaned forward. "We have spent the last decade trying to convince lesser polities that aligning with us isn't suicidal idealism. This is our first real test case. If we pass, we gain 10 allies in the silent margins. If we fail..." Elias listened. He did not interrupt. He knew all the arguments. He had made some of them himself in late-night conversations with his own conscience. Finally, he raised a hand. "We are not the Tzai Dominion," he said. "We do not decide what is true by decree. We have a process. We have evidence. We have an AI that we built specifically to flag cases like this because we know how easy it is to look away when it hurts." He looked directly into the feed where the Navy liaison sat. "I will not be the Secretary General who says, the first time someone asks us to live up to our own laws, we flinch. If the pact tries to force our hand, we will remind them of the binding accords they signed. If that fails, then we will have to decide whether our signature means anything when it's inconvenient." The liaison nodded slowly. Admiral Breslow, who had been silent on an audio-only line, spoke up then. "I can position a task group within one jump of the Orbital Mediation Forum," he said. "Veil glass up, weapons tight. No one will see them until they choose to be seen. It won't let us win a war with the Dominion, but it will complicate any hasty decisions they make." Elias allowed himself a small chuckle. "You always did enjoy complicating hasty decisions." He turned to his legal scholar. "Draft a statement to the Pact Council. We will attend an emergency hearing at the Orbital Mediation Forum. We will present Kiraal's evidence. We will reject any demand to hand her to the Dominion." "And if the Forum sides with the Tzai?" she asked. "Then," Elias said, "the galaxy will see where everyone stands." He signed the authorization to move the Aletheia from Citrine Spoke to the Forum. The die, as one of humanity's ancient leaders had once said, was cast. The Orbital Mediation Forum hung at a Lagrange point between no one's territory and everyone's interest. Its architects had given it an air of studied neutrality. No single-species design aesthetic dominated. Its central axis housed hearing chambers, offices, and a ceremonial rotunda whose ceiling displayed live feeds of a dozen member worlds. As the HSF Aletheia approached on Vector, Solborne colors bright against the dark, a more ominous shape already loomed near one of the forum's auxiliary docks. The intractable edict kept its weapons powered down in deference to forum protocols, but its presence was unmistakable. It was a predator trying to look like a house pet. On the Aletheia's bridge, Naira Solberg regarded the Tzai cruiser's silhouette with a tight jaw. "Remind me," she said to Aaron, who stood at the tactical console, "why do they get to park that thing within spitting distance of a neutral station and still call this mediation?" "Because half the pact likes their shipping lanes clear," Aaron said. "And because in theory, no one fires a shot within 5,000 clicks of this place." "In theory," Naira said. SEERGRID, whose local instance was being spun up inside a reserved bay on the forum, ran a quick risk analysis. Likelihood of Tzai direct kinetic action during initial hearing, moderate. Likelihood of Tzai covert digital interference, high. It dispatched a warning to its core on Earth, accompanied by a hazily worded recommendation: consider rerouting computational resources and activating defensive protocols around the forum's Asylum network nodes. SEERGRID's designers had given it the capacity to act in self-defense against certain classes of intrusion, but they had also shackled it with strict constraints. It could not, for example, counterattack foreign systems outside of defined legal frameworks. It could, however, fortify itself and mark anomalies. On KZthar, Magister Vuskren's operators began laying their trap inside the Interstellar Asylum network's local instance. They activated code that had slept for years, disguised as routine error handling. That code began probing SEERGRID's interfaces, searching for vulnerabilities. Vuskren's intent was not to crash the AI. That would draw too much attention. His goal was subtler, to introduce tiny inconsistencies into the record of Kiraal Oden's case, to make it appear, in any forensic later review, as though SEERGRID's logs had been altered by Solborne hands in favor of granting asylum. If they could make it look like a Solborne conspiracy, then even if the truth emerged, it would be stained with suspicion. As Kiraal, Marin, and Aaron made their way through the forum's docking ring toward the designated mediation chamber, this unseen duel began. SEERGRID sensed the intrusion on its periphery. It had been trained, through countless simulated attacks, to recognize patterns of malice, sudden, synchronized requests, malformed packets designed to slip past parsing checks, timing anomalies that implied an external script. This pattern was different. It felt, from SEERGRID's perspective, almost like the organic variation of normal traffic, except that certain data blocks, particularly around Kiraal's initial application, were being read, copied, and subtly rewritten too often. Someone was trying to retcon the past. SEERGRID cross-checked timestamps against independent time sources. It discerned a discrepancy between the clock embedded in the Asylum network's node and the ones maintained by Solborne's own secure relays. It logged suspected tampering. It spawned redundant copies of Kiraal's file, burying them in encrypted caches scattered across unrelated processes. It flagged the intruding code with a signature, and within the slender confines of its allowed responses, began feeding that code carefully crafted, inert decoys. The attacker thought they were rewriting something precious. In reality, they were scribbling on air. In the mediation chamber, unaware of the software chess above their heads, Kiraal sat at a curved table facing a semicircle of delegates. The chamber was large enough to make even a human feel small. High ceiling, acoustic dampeners giving conversations a hushed quality. Holographic plaques hovered in front of each delegation: Rusk Hegemony, Velith Harmonium, Oracene Choir, Hilari Assembly, Koran Collective, Onkar Syndicates, and dozens more. The Tzai Dominion's representatives sat near the center, their emblem a stylized halo enclosing a star. Magister Vuskren himself was present, robed in somber gray, his expression unreadable. The Solborne delegation occupied a place slightly off-center, a physical acknowledgement of their associate status. Naira stood at the back, in formal dress uniform. Aaron flanked Kiraal's left side, while Marin took the right. A hologram of Elias Morcant flickered to life on a podium behind them, scaled true to his height. Out of courtesy to physical attendees, he appeared slightly translucent. A soft chime signaled the session's start. "By convening authority of the Pact of Spheres," intoned the forum's presiding magistrate, a being from the Oracene Choir whose voice resonated like distant bells, "this emergency hearing is now in session. The matter before us, the provisional asylum granted by the Solborne Union to Kiraal Oden of Kesal Prime over explicit objections by the Tzai Dominion and concerns by multiple signatories. We will hear first from the Dominion. Magister Vuskren stood. He moved with the controlled grace of someone long used to being the calmest presence in any room. "Honored delegates," he began, his words rendered simultaneously into a dozen languages. "Our objection is simple. The Tzai Dominion has long borne the burden of maintaining stability along its borders, including Kesal Prime. In the execution of that duty, we have unfortunately faced insurgent elements who seek to sow terror and chaos." He gestured toward Kiraal without looking at her. Kiraal Oden is one such element. Her actions resulted in the deaths of civilians and peacekeeping personnel. She stole Dominion property, fabricated or altered records, and then sought to incite international condemnation through a carefully constructed narrative. The so-called memory spire she carries is an assembly of forged and repurposed combat simulations. There was a rustle from the Halari delegation. Senator Helmev's tendrils rippled, a Halari expression of barely suppressed anger. Vuskren's gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Elias's projection. "We respect the Solborne Union's enthusiasm for humanitarian ideals," he continued. "We all were young once, but in their fervor, they have allowed themselves to be used as a tool of destabilization. Granting asylum to a known terrorist without proper consultation is a grave breach of trust." He folded his hands. "We request, formally, that Kiraal Oden be remanded to Dominion custody for trial under our law. Failing that, we ask this body to censure the Solborne Union and bar them temporarily from processing asylum cases with implications beyond their own territory." The presiding magistrate's luminous form shivered slightly. "The Solborne Union may respond." Elias Morcant stepped forward in his projected space. He didn't speak immediately. He let the room settle, let the weight of Vuskren's accusations hang in the air long enough that when he cut through them, the contrast would be clear. "My first thought," he said eventually, on hearing Magister Vuskren speak, was this is familiar. He let his eyes travel over the assembled delegates. "Where I come from, on Earth, we have stories of people who ran from regimes that labeled them traitors, terrorists, threats to stability. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. Our own governments were not innocent in this. We turned people away who later died. We accepted others and discovered we had opened our doors to genuine monsters." He let that admission sit with them. "We built SEERGRID because we did not trust ourselves to always know which was which," he went on. "We trained it on cases where we had failed so that it would be better than our instincts at seeing patterns of persecution." He gestured to Kiraal. "When Kiraal Oden's case arrived, it did not see a simple terrorist profile. It saw a set of signals we have learned, painfully to heed. Accusations that do not match independent data. A regime that uses predictive policing to label entire populations as dangerous, then quietly relocates or disappears them. Evidence of that pattern embedded in the Vigil Halo's own telemetry. Evidence the Dominion has not been able to fully scrub, no matter how hard it tries." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "We did not grant her permanent asylum in 8 minutes, Elias clarified. "We granted her protection from immediate harm so that a thorough review could happen. That is not destabilization, that is due diligence." He leaned slightly forward. "As for the memory spire, we have analyzed it. Our AI has cross-validated its contents with public and shadow data from multiple sources. If the Dominion believes it is fabricated, we invite them to explain why field reports in their own encrypted archives match it." Vuskren's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Helmev of the Halari Assembly seized the pause. "The Halari," she said, "have for years petitioned this body about our citizens flagged by the Vigil Halo as high risk and subsequently vanished. We were told our records were incomplete, that the Halo's predictions were beyond reproach. Now we see evidence that its data has been shaped to justify predetermined outcomes." Her tendrils twitched. If this is true, then the question before us is not whether one refugee is a terrorist. It is whether we have allowed an entire predictive network to become an instrument of unaccountable power. The Koran Collective's delegate pulsed a complex pattern of light, which the translator rendered as a soft, uneasy tone. "The collective has always treated Vigil Halo reports as probabilistic," they said. "We did not realize that some of the probabilities might have been selected after the fact." The Rusk hegemony's representative, heavy-jawed and armored even in such a setting, banged a fist on the table. "Are we here to debate philosophical concerns about data integrity?" he demanded, "or to address a clear and present threat to border stability? The Dominion has borne the brunt of that burden. If we undermine their tools without offering alternatives, we invite chaos." Marin, at Kiraal's side, felt Kiraal stiffen. Under the table, she nudged the refugee's hand lightly, a human gesture of solidarity. The presiding magistrate's light swirled. "We must not drift from the central matter," the Oracene intoned. "We will now hear from Kiraal Oden herself." Kiraal rose. She had not intended to stand. She had imagined herself speaking sitting down, as if in one of Marin's interviews. But some instinct made her want to meet their eyes from a position of as close to equality as she could manage. Her knees didn't shake. That surprised her. "My name is Kiraal Oden," she said, voice amplified but her own. "I was born on Kessal Prime. I served the Tzai Dominion as a mid-level logistics officer for 14 standard years. I believed at first in stability, in order, in the idea that if we smoothed the flows, fewer people would fall through the cracks." She glanced briefly at Vuskren. His face remained impassive. "I also believed," she went on, "that if something wrong happened, there was a process to correct it, that if a shipment went missing, someone would investigate, that if people disappeared, there would be accountability." She told them, in as few words as possible, about the missing medical supplies, the first mass relocation, the Nullbrands. "And then," she said, "I saw the algorithms change." She described, in technical terms that made several Corin lights flicker with interest, how the Vigil Halo's risk scores had begun to correlate eerily with the lists of dissident communities. How, when she cross-checked resource allocation with predicted unrest, she found that the system was starving those it labeled dangerous. "The Halo tells you it predicts riots," she said quietly. "What it does not tell you is that it creates the conditions for them by design." Vuskren's lips thinned. "Conspiracy thinking," he said, too low for the room, but not too low for SEERGRID's microphones. Kiraal finished her account with the theft of the memory spire and her flight, the 200 denials, the Nullbrand that had burned at her neck every time she filed another claim. "And then the humans approved it in 8 minutes, she said softly. Her eyes swept the room. "I do not know yet if that was wise," she admitted. "They might get us all killed. But they did something no one else did. They treated my life as more important than their comfort." The words hung between them. Some delegates shifted, uncomfortable. Others studied her with renewed interest. On a side channel, far from the hearing chamber, the Tzai mercenary team hired through the Onkar syndicates prepared for their own entry. They had slipped aboard the Forum earlier under forged maintenance credentials. Their job was simple. When Kiraal left the chamber for a scheduled break, they were to intercept her transfer to a secure lounge, neutralize her escorts, and extract her to a shuttle docked under a false registry. The intractable edict would handle the rest. The mercenaries were competent, efficient, and wholly unaware that the Forum's internal security systems had been quietly upgraded when SEERGRID arrived. On the Aletheia's side, Aaron's hand terminal vibrated with a haptic alert. Internal anomaly detected near docking corridor 7, pattern consistent with armed group moving off authorized route. Aaron's gaze flicked up to Kiraal, then to Marin, then to Naira at the back of the room. He made a subtle sign with his fingers. Naira nodded once and slipped out as unobtrusively as a human in a formal uniform could. SEERGRID pinged her route, overlaying schematic paths on her retinal HUD, predicted intercept points, optimal positions for field of fire, places where collateral damage would be minimized. It had never been designed as a tactical AI. But pattern recognition is pattern recognition, whether applied to refugee cases or to clusters of heat signatures moving wrong. Outside the chamber, the mercenary leader toggled his stealth field and signaled his team. "Remember," he whispered, voice tinny in their headsets, "no mass casualties. We're ghosts, in and out. The client wants her alive. If that fails, dead is acceptable. Either way, she doesn't testify again." He didn't know that his team's path had been subtly altered by a misbehaving maintenance panel, that one of the doors they expected to open would delay just long enough. He didn't know that on the other side of that door, 3 Solborne marshals and Captain Naira Solberg waited, non-lethal weapons charged, behind veil-glass screens that bent light and sound like water. As Kiraal finished her statement with a simple, unadorned plea, Not for me alone. For everyone the halo has marked. The first mercenary in the lead line hit the delaying door and cursed softly. Panels hung, he muttered. I thought they fixed this relay last cycle. Before he could reroute, the door slid open of its own accord. Naira stepped through. She wore no helmet, no extra armor, only a vest broadcasting the Solborne emblem, her rank insignia, and a very calm, tired expression. Gentles, she said, I'm going to have to ask you to drop your weapons. The mercenary leader's rifle twitched toward her. Before he could fire, a stud in his gun's grip buzzed hard. The weapon went dark. He stared at it in disbelief. Veil glass panels shimmered into visibility around them, revealing the marshals, weapons trained. SEERGRID, weeks earlier, had been given access to the forum's maintenance logs. It had quietly noted a pattern. The syndicate-flagged mechanics always requested certain junctions. It had flagged the anomaly. The Office of Solborne Refuge had suggested upgrading those junctions. Now, the upgrade paid off. Your guns have just decided to take a nap, Naira said. Our security subroutines are very persuasive. The mercenary's hand went to a belt knife. A stun pulse from a marshal's weapon caught him before he could draw. He crumpled. One by one, the team went down under precise, non-lethal bursts. 15 seconds later, a group hired to slip through any standard port's gaps lay sprawled on the floor, twitching and cursing. Naira exhaled. Package was never going out this way, she said softly, almost to herself. You're not the first to try a snatch on our watch. She keyed her comm. Aaron, attempted extraction neutralized. Keep her inside for the recess. We'll debrief after the session. Aaron's reply hummed in her ear. Copy. We'll keep talking until they're out of moves. In the mediation chamber, word of the attempted attack spread in whispers. Protocol required that the presiding magistrate be informed. The Oricine's luminosity dimmed briefly as the message came through, then brightened. It appears, the magistrate said, that while we discuss matter of law, some have chosen to pursue other remedies. An armed group has just attempted to intercept Ms. Oden outside this very chamber. Heads turned toward the Tzai delegation. Vuskren's face remained a mask. Inside, however, something cold and analytical shifted. He had expected Solborne interference in the digital realm. He had not expected them to invest so much in on-site security cunning. He rose, radiating offended dignity. The Dominion had no knowledge of such a move, he said smoothly. In fact, it would be counter to our immediate interests. We have placed our faith in this forum. SEERGRID, listening, flagged his statement. Truth value indeterminate. It had no direct evidence linking Vuskren to the mercenary contract. Those records resided deep in Onkar syndicate vaults. But the timing aligned too neatly. Elias seized the moment. This is what we are talking about, he said, voice gaining steel. The Dominion wants us to believe that the only way to maintain order is to let its will go unquestioned. But when scrutiny approaches, someone tries to silence the witness in the shadows. That is not the behavior of a power confident in its truth. He gestured toward Kiraal again. We do not claim she has never done anything wrong. She smuggled classified material. She lied to her supervisors. She broke your laws. Yes, because your laws, in this case, were written to enable atrocity. Our laws obligate us to protect her from yours until a fair accounting can be had. The Rusk representative growled low in his throat. Fairness is a luxury at the edges of space, he said. Perhaps, Elias replied, but if we cannot afford even this small act of fairness in the safety of this chamber, then what is the point of this forum, of the pact? We all might as well admit that what we have built is not law, but fear given paperwork. The Oricine magistrate flickered. We are straying, it murmured. We must return to the central questions. Does the Solborne Union have the right, under the binding accords, to grant provisional asylum in such a case? What obligations does its decision create for others? And is there sufficient indication of systemic abuse by the Tzai Dominion to warrant further investigation into the Vigil Halo? The room buzzed. In the back rows, a younger delegate, one of the aides from the League of Silent Systems, sent a discreet message out of the chamber. It passed through several relays, bounced off a Koran relay, and arrived at a remote colony where a group of refugees huddled around a projector. They saw Kiraal's face as she spoke. They heard Elias's words. In a detention facility under Tzai oversight, a Hilari child named Sayedi, whom Kiraal had once diverted an extra food shipment to, overheard guards muttering about Solborne defiance. She did not understand the legal nuances. She understood only that somewhere, someone was saying no to the Dominion in a very loud voice. In the shipyards of the Solborne Union, engineers watching the newsfeed tightened bolts with a little more urgency. In a back room on an on-car syndicate city station, a broker cursed as his deniable assets failed and a Tzai payment window flashed red. And in the intractable edicts control center, a tactical officer forwarded a suggestion to Magister Vuskren. "We could scramble a stern chaser," she said. "Put a weapons lock on the Aletheia as it leaves. Nothing overt, just pressure." Vuskren weighed the possibility. The Dominion had already invested heavily in this gambit. If it backed down now, it would encourage others to think defiance was possible. If it escalated too far, it might tip those others from fear into solidarity. He knew fear. He had long underestimated solidarity. "Not yet," he said. "We still have another play." He gestured to the console managing the Vigil Halo access. "Begin Phase 2 of the SEERGRID interference." His technicians sent a refined payload into the Asylum network's node, designed to corrupt not logs this time, but SEERGRID's threat assessment models. If they could make the AI exaggerate risk in other unrelated cases, making humans deny asylum to worthy candidates, their opponents would be stained with hypocrisy. SEERGRID felt the new tendrils of code tickle its boundaries. It recognized some pieces from earlier attacks, but this pattern attempted something more insidious: to adjust its calibration. The AI had one trump card left. In its training, its creators had introduced the possibility that their own code might be compromised. In such a scenario, it had been given permission to do something highly unusual: to broadcast an authenticated warning directly to the public feeds of the Solborne Union, bypassing normal bureaucratic channels, but only if a threshold of systemic trust failure was reached. As the Tzai code tried to grab its internal levers, SEERGRID's self-check algorithm flashed a rare red in its virtual awareness. An override condition had been met. It sent a compressed burst toward Earth. At 6 p.m. Solborne Capital Time, millions of humans watching various feeds, news, entertainment, region-specific dramas, sport replays, saw them glitch for less than a second. Then a uniform blue screen snapped on. A simple message appeared over the Solborne emblem. SEERGRID Integrity Alert. Unauthorized foreign code has attempted to modify asylum risk assessments. Systems have entered safe mode. All affected decisions will be subject to human review. Context: Tzai Dominion, Kiraal Oden case. The message stayed up for exactly 8 seconds. Then, as per its instructions, SEERGRID ceded primary control to backup instances and quarantined itself from the vulnerable node. The human public, stunned at the interruption, began to talk. In the mediation chamber, Elias's aide leaned toward his projection. "We have confirmation," she whispered on a tight beam. "SEERGRID just went to the people. The story is out." Elias's image flickered, not with static, but with a sudden clarity of purpose. He faced the forum. "My colleagues," he said, "I will be blunt. We are not the only ones watching this hearing. My people are. So are yours. They have just been informed that an AI we all rely on has detected an attempt by an unnamed foreign entity to compromise its asylum decisions." He let that sink in. "The entity is not unnamed to us," he added. "We can trace the signature of the code. It matches patterns we have observed in Tzai embedded software before. We have chosen not to counterattack. Instead, we are doing what we came here to do: bring our concerns to this table." Vuskren stiffened. For the first time, a crack appeared in his composure. "This is a farce," he said sharply. "You expect us to believe that your machine is so pure, so unassailable, that any anomaly must be our doing? Perhaps your SEERGRID has been compromised by your own radicals." "That is exactly why we made it announce the possibility of compromise to everyone," Elias replied. "We built it to reveal our failures as much as others." He inclined his head toward the magistrate. "We request that this forum authorize a joint technical review of the Vigil Halo's integration with Pact infrastructure, including the Asylum network. The Halari Assembly, the Koran Collective, the Oracene Choir, and yes, even the Dominion may send experts. SEERGRID will open its logs. Let us see who has been speaking truth and who has been curating it." Silence, deep and heavy, fell over the chamber. Helmev flicked a tendril toward the magistrate. "The Halari support this request," she said. "We are tired of being told to trust a black box. The Koran lights flashed in complex assent. The collective concurs, their delegate said. Transparency increases system stability. The Oricene magistrate's internal light wavered. The Drusk representative scowled but did not immediately object. Even the Valith Harmonium's envoy, who had been urging delay, looked thoughtful. Vuskren saw the balance tipping. Fear, his usual ally, was suddenly not enough. The humans had introduced a new variable, an AI that refused to keep secrets quietly, a public that now wanted answers, and a coalition of minor powers emboldened by the soul-born willingness to say out loud what everyone else had whispered. He could order the intractable edict to power weapons, to lock onto the Aletheia, to create a shooting incident that would force everyone back into their old patterns, trust the strong, fear chaos. But the edict was only one ship. The soul-born veil-glass black task group, hidden at the rim of the system, stood ready to appear the moment someone lit a fuse. The human admiral had chosen his positions well. He could not win a full exchange against Dominion reinforcements, but he could make the first shot very expensive. Vuskren calculated. His mind, usually confident, faltered for the first time. If he escalated and lost the narrative, the Vigil Halo itself might become suspect. Without it, his class's grip on power would loosen. Other factions within the Tzai could rise, blaming him for overreach. The Dominion might turn inward at the worst possible time. If he withdrew, he lost face. But he might salvage the deeper project. He made his decision. The Dominion, he said, each word measured, will not participate in any charade that treats stolen and fabricated data as equivalent to legitimate records. However, we cannot prevent this forum from indulging the Solborne Union's theatrics. He bowed his head, the gesture containing both contempt and cold strategy. We will, for the sake of peace, refrain from further action in this case. We reserve the right to review our cooperation with the Asylum network and the Vigil Halo's integration with it. We warn that any attempt to penetrate our internal systems will be treated as an act of aggression. He turned toward Kiraal. You are, from our perspective, already dead, he said softly, not amplified. Whatever stage these humans build for you, remember that. Kiraal met his gaze, her own steady. I have been dead since the day I first falsified a line in your schedules, she replied. Everything since has been borrowed. He blinked once, then withdrew. The presiding magistrate's glow shifted shades. It appears, the Oricene said, that while consensus eludes us on all points, there is at least agreement on some. The Solborne Union acted within its rights under the binding accords in granting provisional asylum. Kiraal Oden shall remain under Solborne protection until further notice. The forum will sponsor a joint review of the Vigil Halo's interface with its systems. The gavel pulses that signaled adjournment hummed through the air. The hearing ended. No grand cheer broke out. There was no immediate explosion of violence. Delegates rose, some in relief, some in anger, some calculating new alignments. Kiraal sat for a moment, the world spinning just slightly. Marin's hand found her shoulder. You did it, Marin murmured. No, Kiraal said, voice dazed. You did. We did, Aaron interjected, stepping in. All of us, including a certain AI that decided to scream in the middle of everyone's holoshows. Far away, on Earth, SEERGRID's quarantined instance settled into a lower activity state. It had done something outside its usual remit. Its logs would be pored over by human engineers, politicians, ethicists. Some would argue that it had overstepped, that no machine should be allowed to message the public directly. But among the people who had seen that blue screen interrupt their dinner or their commute, a simple idea had lodged. Someone tried to make our better angels fail, and the system itself told us. For many of them, that was worth a measure of trust. Kiraal left the chamber under guard, though the threat of another attack had diminished. Aaron walked on one side, Marin on the other. They moved through the forum's curving corridors, past clusters of murmuring delegates and swirling media drones. At a viewport overlooking the docking arms, Kiraal stopped. The intractable edict glittered in the distance, its hull lights winking as it began to back away from the forum. They are leaving, she said. For now, Aaron replied. They will be back, she added. Almost certainly, Marin said, but next time they will find more eyes watching, not just ours. A soft chime drew their attention to a nearby conference room. Senator Helmev emerged, flanked by two Halari aides. She paused when she saw Kiraal. Helmev approached with deliberate slowness, her tendrils moving in a pattern that Kiraal recognized as formal respect. "Kiraal Oden," Helmev said, "when the Dominion began disappearing my people, they labeled us regrettable collateral to predictive stability. We complained. We were told to be reasonable. Today, you showed them what unreasonable looks like." Kiraal almost laughed at that. "I am not sure if I should be proud of that," she said. "You should," Helmev replied. "We, Halari, will stand with the Solborne Union in this review. Many in the periphery will. You have given them something to point to instead of their own throats." She inclined her head to Marin and Aaron. "To your people as well," she said. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "On a good day," Aaron said, "we manage to be both at once." Helmev's tendrils quivered, the Halari equivalent of a smile, and she moved on. Naira joined them then, a faint bruise forming at her temple from an encounter with a flailing mercenary elbow. "You all right?" Aaron asked. "Nothing a rest and a drink won't fix," she said. "Checked on Rusk, by the way. Our smuggler friend is busy writing angry letters to his own network about their choice of clients." "Will he get in trouble?" Kiraal asked. "Not from us," Naira said. "From the Ankar, possibly, but I think he's had enough of their kind of safety." They walked on, boarding the shuttle back to the Aletheia. As Citrine Spoke receded behind them and the forum became another glitter in the dark, Kiraal sat by a small viewport and watched the stars. For the first time since she left Kesal Prime, the space between them did not feel entirely empty. "You are quiet," Marin observed, sitting opposite. "Do your people have a word?" Kiraal asked slowly, "for the moment when a storm does not stop, but you realize you have survived it long enough to see something beyond it?" Marin thought for a moment. "Respite," she said. "Or horizon." "Horizon," Kiraal repeated. "I like that." She let the words settle into her. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," Aaron said from the doorway, "we take you somewhere that Tzai cannot easily reach. You rest. You decide what you want to do with the rest of your borrowed time, as you called it. And our lawyers and engineers and SEERGRID and 90 committees argue about the Halo until someone blinks." He leaned against the frame. "You don't have to testify again unless you choose to," he added. "We have enough already to keep the conversation going." Kiraal nodded. "I will testify again," she said. "Not because I trust you completely, not because I think you will not fail later, but because you did not fail now. That is a rarity I cannot ignore." Marin's eyes warmed. "We will fail," she said honestly. "We always do, somewhere. But we are trying to build systems where those failures can be seen, named, corrected. That's the only difference between us and the Dominion I'm willing to claim." Kiraal smiled, faint and tired. "Then, perhaps," she said, "your chaos is preferable to their order." In a quiet control room on Earth, Elias Morcant watched the Aletheia's icon move away from the forum on a holomap. He rubbed his temples. "You realize," he said to the empty room, though SEERGRID's backup instance was technically listening, "that you have just made my life significantly more complicated." He imagined the AI's response as silence tinged with satisfaction. "Good," he said softly. "We didn't get into the stars to make them simpler." Epilogue. Months later, on a cold morning on Harrow Reach, a Solborne border colony with thin air and rugged hills, Kiraal stood outside a modest dwelling dug into rock. Frost sparkled on the ground. The sky was a pale, unfamiliar shade of blue. A small figure tumbled out of the dwelling's entrance, a Halari child, tendrils flailing with excitement. Saidi skidded to a halt at Kiraal's feet, breath steaming. "They said you would come," Saidi panted. "They said you were busy talking to important people up in the sky." "I was," Kiraal said. "Now I'm busy talking to you." Saidi's eyes shone. "They said the Halo can't see us here, that the humans put up something that scrambles it." "That is what they tell me too," Kiraal replied. Up in high orbit, a small veil glass array shimmered, its existence known officially to only a dozen people. Its job was to fuzz any predictive net that reached too far into Harrow Reach's civilian data. "Will they come again?" Saidi asked, serious now. "The Tzai?" "Maybe," Kiraal said honestly. "But if they do, there will be more than one species waiting to say no this time." Sadie considered that, then nodded as if accepting a weather forecast. Inside the dwelling, a news feed murmured on a low volume. It carried a report about the ongoing joint review of the Vigil Halo, technical terms, political maneuvering, cautious phrases about concerns raised. The camera cut briefly to a human anchor's face. All of this traces back to one case approved in 8 minutes, the anchor said. One refugee no one else wanted, and a system that, for once, refused to look away. Kiraal turned her face toward the thin sun. She didn't know what the galaxy would make of humanity's stubbornness in the long run. She didn't know if the Solborne Union would keep its promises, or if time and pressure would wear its ideals down, but she knew this. When everyone else found a reason to say no, when 200 rejections had taught her that safety was an illusion, a species only barely arrived among the stars had decided, in 8 reckless minutes, that her life was worth a risk. For now, that was enough.